Thank you for joining us. The webinar will begin shortly. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by PYA. Today, we are continuing our Timely, Tough or Tricky Physician Compensation and Fair Market Value Topics series with a presentation on PYA's 2024 Top 10 High Demand Physician Specialties. PYA is happy to present today's webinar on this important topic. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing a message into the questions pane of the control panel. We'll collect these and address them via email after the webinar. And all our webinars are recorded and released with a copy of the slides after the event. With that, I would like to introduce PYA principals Lyle Oelrich and Zach Doolin. Both Lyle and Zach consult with physician practices, hospitals, and healthcare systems in the areas of fair market value compensation and commercial reasonableness, contract compliance, physician compensation design, development and strategy, physician supply and demand studies, and value-based compensation. Lyle and Zach have 25 and 15 years of experience respectively in these areas, as well as in advising clients relative to physician and hospital economic alignment models and assisting hospitals and physician practices with other strategic, financial, and operational issues.
Thank you, Trevor, and good afternoon, everyone. And for some, good morning. For those of you all on the West Coast, Zach and I are extremely happy to be here today, and we certainly welcome each of you. Before we jump in, I want to express a moment of gratitude to each of you all for joining us here today and for allowing us to continue to have these webinar series. This is actually the first session in our third season of the Triple T, and that's what we often refer to as the Timely, Tough or Tricky webinar series. So if you hear us use that acronym, you know what we're referring to there, but we're extremely appreciative of your continued support and participation and looking forward to this next season as well. I thought we'd start here along those lines with a brief recap of where we've been over the last couple of seasons. I will ask at this moment, Trevor, as the moderator, if you'll just chat in a link to this webinar series where you can find all of the items that are on this page here over the last couple of seasons in the event that you missed it or you wanted to revisit it. Of course, all of these are complimentary. They're 30 minutes. They're intended to be short, sweet, and to the point. We know your time is precious and informative as well. And we try to hit each of those goals every time that we have one of these webinar series. So I'm not going to go through all of the ones that you see here on the screen here today, but there are many of these that continue to be applicable today. Certainly the Medicare physician fee schedule is always a hot topic. It is again this year. You all, I'm sure, have been hearing about, thinking about, and maybe even making changes to things from the Medicare physician fee schedule, such as G2211, which is going to have a significant impact on coding and physician reimbursement, as well as most of you all are well aware, there have been some recent legislation that's been enacted by President Biden, which now has changed the Medicare conversion factor, leaving a reduction of about 1.69% in place for the remainder of the year. So how does all of that play on physician compensation? How does it all play on fair market value? Those are all issues that are important for all of us to continue to think about. So with that being said, onwards we go. So we want to spend a little bit of time talking about where we're going to head in 2024. So We've spent quite a bit of time talking with physician compensation experts in the industry, other healthcare professionals, using our experience with how we work with clients in both fair market value and physician compensation planning arena. And then we're constantly seeking feedback from individuals like you all. And so in a moment, we're going to share a preliminary list of some of the topics that we're hearing that are timely, tough, or tricky from you all. It's a preliminary list because we really would love to hear from you all as to what's important to you, what ideas you may have that we could visit in the future. We'd love to be as helpful as possible. So please feel free to chat in those ideas, questions, comments at any point during the presentation. And know, please, as well, only the moderator, Zach, and I will be able to see those particular comments. So there's no worries there either. So here is a word cloud of some of the triple T sort of topics that we're hearing are important to some of the folks that we've spoken to in 2024. And so again, the larger the word, the more common or more frequent that we're hearing these types of issues being talked about in the industry. There's certainly some themes here that we continue to hear. So APPs, your mid-level providers, things like leadership, organizational structure, strategic planning, even perhaps where to house and take care of some of the contractual issues within APPs. Is that HR, or is that perhaps in a physician contracting department? Those are all ideas that we're hearing about needing some advice and expertise on. Compensation models is another one. You see that one's squarely right in the middle of the page. Of course, if you've seen one comp model, you've seen one, and I don't know that I've ever applied one compensation model from one client to the next and it work with precision. Everything is individual facts and circumstances. There are different cultures, different ideas that need to be considered. Of course, one of the most common being work RVUs and how that might be played, particularly in a hospital employment arena. But as everybody is well aware, there are a tremendous number of changes that continue to happen to the work RVUs. And so to some extent, and in some specialties, it's kind of challenging the prevalence of that model here moving into the future. Then value-based arrangements, you'll see that one in here as well, another sort of trending topic. It's finally getting some steam now after the 2021 Stark regulatory changes. But then also, we asked the question of you all, just as I brought it up a couple of moments ago, and sort of the pre-webinar topics, again, what are some of these triple T topics that you're starting to deal with or needing some help with? And I got some really great examples as well. So one of them, for example, was what's the impact of wage inflation compared to the lag of survey data? And of course, I think everybody's well aware when you're looking at physician compensation surveys, they typically lag 12 to maybe 24 months at most. And so how do you deal with the real-time issue of some of the inflation and compensation wages and the like? And then how do you navigate starting and soaring bonuses without busting the budget? I found that one particularly interesting, and we may visit that in another particular session here. So we look forward to incorporating your thoughts. Again, please chat those in at any point in time. We really would appreciate your thoughts and feedback on that. So let's jump right in now to the main entree for today, which is the top 10 physician compensation and high demand specialties. And before we jump into this, and the way we're going to handle this is I'm going to cover specialties 6 through 10, and then Zach is going to pick it up from there and take us through the final 5. But before we get into any of those, I really wanted to spend just a couple of moments talking about the methodology, because everybody's got a top 10 list, and we want to explain how ours was derived. So first of all, we're helping clients in all 50 states deal with physician specialties of all types. And so a lot of times our clients reach out to us with their pain point specialties. And these are ones that they're really struggling with. Things are changing rapidly. They need a solution for their particular problem, and so they're coming to us. So we've got a feeling from that perspective as to which specialties are in high demand. Also, we look at how compensation changes year to year, and we often refer to that as a CAGR, or the combined annual growth rate, and that's a measure of the percent change in compensation from year to year. And so by looking at that, we can all talk about all of these particular variables that are impacting compensation, but this really gives us an inclination as to how much those variables are actually changing physician compensation. We're also constantly reading and researching these particular specialties. We're doing physician supply and demand studies, so we're really trying to keep our thumb on the market so that we can come up with this specific list that we're sharing here with you today. And so before I reveal the top 5, again 6 through 10, one more comment. We're going to talk about several of these specialties, but we're not going to get into a lot of the issues that are impacting many specialties. So things like physician burnout, the aging physician population, the aging patient population, and COVID-19 and how that's impacted specialties. All of that are impacting almost all specialties. But we're going to try to get into some of the real specific specialty items as we talk through these, but I don't want to discount those items either, because they can have a very significant impact on these specialties. So here are the specialties that are 6 through 10, if you will, and we're going to count them down one by one. So coming in at number 10 is OBGYN. We are continuing to see significant malpractice premium increases. These have been around for some period of time, but it truly is impacting the specialty. We've got OBGYNs that are giving up the OB piece of that and going right just to GYN only. We've got physicians who are choosing not to go into OBGYN because the malpractice premiums are so extensive. So that's really impacting this particular specialty. And then the compensation models can be challenging as well. It's important that we reward individual productivity in almost all instances, but in most instances, and OB/GYN is no exception, that teamwork needs to be rewarded as well. And so that's an issue that's impacting this specialty. We've got the development of laborist programs. So again, those are sort of the hospitalist concept, but specific to OB/GYN, that are helping with the uninsured patient population, perhaps women who have not had appropriate prenatal care. Those are all pulling on resources in the OB arena, creating more demand for those particular resources. We've got women who are generally, in some instances, delaying childbirth. And when they do that, as they age, there's more risk and a higher demand. And then there's over 1,000, and I don't know if you all are aware of this or have heard of this, but there are over 1,000 maternity care deserts as well that are out there, where there's no hospitals, there's no birth centers, no OB/GYNs, or nurse midwives. And so all of that's playing into OB. Again, I'd love to talk more about that, but moving on for the sake of time, emergency medicine, there's a lot of competition that's out there, not just for physician practices to serve hospitals in that arena, but also national contract groups who are competing for these physicians, the Team Healths of the world, if you will. Lifestyle is challenging for emergency medicine physicians, always has been, likely always will be. The night shifts, the no lunch, the little continuity of care, where a lot of physicians might struggle. And then in comparison, you've got competition with urgent care as well, where you've got a similar skill set that's needed, but perhaps a better lifestyle, which can be found in an urgent care setting. And then also, there are a number of residency slots that are going unfilled. I think there are over 500 or so residency slots in 2023 that went unfilled in emergency medicine. So if there's a shortage now, if those continue, there's going to be an even greater shortage. Coming in at number 8, hospitalists. The intensity of schedule continues to be a challenge for some in this particular industry. And it's always a little bit of a natural competition with kind of the outpatient medicine, where you can have a little bit more of a predicted schedule. It's not as hectic perhaps as it is in the hospital setting. It's becoming more and more difficult to find coverage on nights and weekends, even within the hospitalist itself. And then the shortage of primary care physicians as well. Obviously, if there are fewer primary care physicians, that's the skill set that's needed in the hospitalist arena. So that can be problematic as well. Number 7, orthopedics. I mentioned the combined annual growth rate. We typically see a combined annual growth rate, or the CAGR, about 2 to 3%. Anything at 3% or higher, and again, it might sound relatively small percent change to some of you all, but anything above 3%, we're seeing some material changes in the market. Orthopedics is at a little over 7%. And so there are significant compensation changes in that arena. Obviously, the aging of the baby boomers, obesity rates, which put more impact on bones and joints, which is creating extra demand for orthopedic physicians. People being more active later in their life, subspecialization, of course, within orthopedics, which has been around some time. However, some physicians, they become so specialized that in some markets, it doesn't serve them well when they need some general orthopedic needs. And of course, there's a big outpatient movement for orthopedics as well. Then finally, for family medicine, again, there's a pretty significant CAGR here. I think it's a little over 3.5%. But there's, in some instances, there's a lack of competitive wages. So while that's growing at a pretty good pace, there are a number of physicians who look at what those physicians are paid and just choose to go into another specialty, because to them, at least, those numbers will never be where they want to be from a wage perspective. We've also got new models of care, which are really pulling on the primary care and the family medicine physicians. We're talking about value-based arrangement, care coordination, accountable care organizations, or just to name a few. And of course, there are primary care health professional shortages all across the US, which are even more indicative of the need for these primary care physicians. So that's the top 6 through 10. I'm going to pause here and transition to Zach and let him take us from there.
Thanks, Lyle. Just a couple of comments on these specialties as well. I think compensation modeling on the prior slides was one of the top requested items. Primary care compensation modeling is probably one of our most requested specialties to assist with all the different items you were mentioning of value-based care and panel sizes and ways to think outside of the work RVU. And just, you won't see these specialties in here, but I felt like they were important. Gastroenterology and urology still be very, very difficult for our clients to recruit. And where this COVID, ICU would have been in our top 10. Since then, it's slowed down a little, but it just goes to show you as things change and year over year. COVID seems like it was yesterday to me, but it's 2024 now. It's no longer in our top 10. So number 5, oncology. Probably not a surprise to many of you on the call, with 2 million more cancer cases expected for 2024 than 2023. Compounding the issues with oncology is a shortage of oncologists. We're expected to see a shortage of 2,400 by 2025. As Lyle was mentioning, we look at the CAGR, or the compounded annual growth rate, for several of these specialties as a part of our trending. And I'll mention later on that sometimes the benchmarks are further behind than we think. Our benchmarks are from 2023, which are based on 2022, and we're already into March 2024. We're expecting new surveys to start coming out any time now, but these numbers are 2 to 5% for oncology almost. And if you think about that, that means medical oncology, for this case 4.5%, for the past 3 years has went up almost 15% from 2018, which is a significant increase. The other challenge I think our clients face with oncology is there's a very big difference in employed oncologists versus private practice oncology. And then what to do with the different revenue streams in private practice versus employed. Infusion services can be very difficult to structure and make sure you, in your employment agreements, making sure you're accounting for anything to do with non-physician services appropriately, which is a little different than private practice, where you can see a little bit of the benefit from other ancillary services. Anything to add on oncology, Lyle?
Nope, keep going.
On to the next one, number 4. Number 4 is the specialty I thought would be the number 1 specialty this year. It is by far the specialty that I've worked on the most this year in 2024. And maybe perhaps when we do this update, if we do this update in 2025, radiology will be the top specialty. Ever since COVID-19, the advent of different technologies and teleradiology and different technologies like telehealth, we've seen radiology compensation starting to increase. We have new graduates of radiology coming out of school, and they're jumping into these teleradiology companies where they're able to earn compensation on a per work review basis or a per read basis at a very high rate. But the challenge with radiology is that a radiology group really needs each other. So the interventional radiologist needs to work with the diagnostic radiologist, and they need the breast radiologist to truly serve a hospital client. You have to have all forms of radiology, where the teleradiology companies oftentimes can't fulfill all the needs of a hospital. So becoming a challenge with the local groups or the employed groups that recruiting physicians, trying to recruit these physicians in at salary levels, competing with the teleradiology companies, which are offering sometimes higher salaries. So as a result of those pressures, we're seeing radiology compensation increase significantly. As I mentioned, our surveys being 2023 are based on 2022. It would not surprise me at all to see radiology next year above 3% across the board here for pediatrics, interventional, and diagnostic. And perhaps one of the most challenging specialties to recruit is a qualified breast radiologist, especially if you have a cancer center and you're trying to find someone who's qualified and certified in that particular area. From a compensation design perspective, radiology is also one of our top requested specialties, given that the differences of how the specialties have to work together in a private practice setting. Some would like to go productivity-based, but productivity-based procedures for a radiologist, the diagnostic radiologist can do much more than an interventional radiologist, but both are needed to help each other and for the practice to grow and to continue to have successful relationships. So radiology number 4, my guess, we'll see if I'm right next year, is radiology maybe number 1 or 2, but the year is still young, and 2025 is at least 8 months away from now, 9 months away.
And Zach, of course, you can see here, there's a little bit of a trend going on with the hospital-based specialties as well within this top 10. And that may continue as well as you continue your thoughts.
So one of the specialties I was personally surprised to see in our talk, but as I stepped back and I looked at some of the data that we had, I realized I should not have been surprised at all. Psychiatry is not a specialty that I personally worked on a lot last year or even this year, but it was our number 1 requested specialty to help our clients with. And as I was studying this specialty and reading up in preparation, I found some of these stats on the screen to be interesting. 28 million adults in the US experience symptoms of mental health that go untreated. Another article I read mentioned that 1 in 8 emergency department visits now is psychiatry or mental health related. 2.7 million youth in the US have severe depression. 60% of youth with major depression do not receive any mental health. As a result of the big push for behavioral health, we're seeing a lot of clients beef up these services, add these services, and look for telepsych as solutions to help solve this issue. But especially in remote areas, our clients are struggling to find ways to have that mental health coverage. And in some instances, we're seeing states and governments step in with grant funding to help fund telepsychiatry, telebehavioral health programs, social workers, psychiatrists, behavioral health specialists to really step in and help with the mental health crisis we face as a country now. So I suspect this specialty, like radiology, will continue to grow. Compensation for the specialty is challenging. There's a big difference in inpatient psychiatry, outpatient psychiatry, psyop psychiatry, geriatric psychiatry. There's lots of different types of psychiatry, and often when you're looking at benchmarks, you're not always sure if you're getting the right mix, what's really included in the benchmark data. We found some different ways to look at the different markets to help our clients with this area of psychiatry. one of the most interesting or challenging things about psychiatry, especially in patient psychiatry, is you also have psychiatry in jails and prisons, and it's one of the specialties where your provider can be subject to violence. When there's a risk for violence, there's a need for additional compensation oftentimes to entice people to want to take on those jobs. So I think psychiatry is going to be one of the fun specialties to follow over the next few years, just to see what changes, especially with technology and the different types of providers, and the way psychiatry is provided will be one that I think we'll see growing in the future. Number 2, cardiology and cardiac surgery. This specialty, I think the big driver for this specialty being in the top 10 at number 2, I think oftentimes has to do with the amount of compensation involved. This is one of the specialties that we get often asked to help provide opinions for. And I think the reason for that is it's not uncommon for a cardiac surgeon or a cardiac thoracic surgeon to have a compensation or a salary in the millions of dollars. Anytime you're dealing with big dollars like that, you want to make sure you're paying fair market value, and you're structuring the contract appropriately, you're accounting for productivity models correctly. And then there's a huge need in the United States for cardiovascular care. Cardiovascular diseases are the number 1 cause of death in the US. So again, not being clinical in nature myself, but I think we'll see cardiology-related specialties continue to grow, and I think we'll see compensation for these specialties continue to grow as well. And last but not least, anesthesiology, and this is one I think Lyle and I could have probably spent the whole 30 minutes talking about. COVID-19 created some significant challenges to our anesthesiology clients. I think it started with CRNAs being repurposed to the ICU, CRNAs becoming more valuable. The shortage of CRNAs led to large increases in CRNA compensation over the past couple of years. Baby boomers, by 2030, all baby boomers will be older than 35 or 65. Showing, as Lyle mentioned earlier, the aging population. There's sometimes more need for surgeries, more need for care, more need for surgical care is growing. But because of the need for anesthesiology and the increasing compensation, anesthesiology practices are facing significant operational and financial challenges. Reimbursement for anesthesiology continues to decline. CRNA compensation continues to increase. Also, the duties CRNAs are being asked to do are also increasing. It'll be interesting to watch how CRNAs and the role of a CRNA continues to change going forward. Will CRNAs be given more responsibility? Will the laws change and allow them to be able to do more without the supervision of a physician? And the decreasing conversion factor of Medicare for anesthesiology is something to keep an eye on too. With the baby boomer population, Medicare growing, and the conversion factor for Medicare declining, the reimbursements declining. This has resulted in a big shift of some anesthesiology practices selling, either transitioning from private practice to employment, or even looking for private equity funding to help them stand themselves back up. It's going to be a specialty that I think it's calmed down a little bit since last year, but it's still some significant challenges with anesthesiology, and I think we'll continue to see this specialty in the top 10 going forward. Lyle, I'm sure there's something you might want to add on anesthesiology.
No, I would just quickly say, because things are changing so rapidly, compensation, namely for both the anesthesiologist as well as the CRNAs, we're seeing some organizations that have historically been with an anesthesia group for decades reevaluate whether they can still be served by these groups because they've had such difficulty retaining and getting the appropriate number of FTEs to be able to serve them efficiently. So when you start walking away from decades of relationships, that's a real significant finding that there's a supply issue there in that particular specialty.
Well, this was a whirlwind of 10 specialties real quick in 30 minutes, but we'll turn it back over to the moderator, and please submit your questions and we'll be happy to respond to them.
Thanks to our presenters, Lyle and Zach. If you have any questions, their presentation and contact information will be emailed to you along with a recording of today's webinar. Also, if PYA can provide assistance with audit, tax, compliance, valuation, or physician services, call or email us. You may also visit our website at pyapc.com for more details about our specific areas of expertise or to subscribe to receive PYA insights. On behalf of PYA, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.